sit down somewhere?
Mom,
This is
he's
so
picking on me.
If you know your party's extension, please dial it now.
Houston, we have a problem.
Sick of all this complaining all the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Multitasking in Heels. We are thrilled to have you here, and Lindsay and I are very excited to introduce you to our guest today. Joining us is Lauren Beitelspacher. Lauren is a professor of marketing at Babson College, and she does not like to toot her own horn, so I'm going to do it for her. Sorry, Lauren. In addition to being a professor, she's also chair of her division, has been published in a variety of scholarly journals, been asked to present her work at numerous conferences, is involved in philanthropic activities in our community, has run the Boston Marathon, has 2 intelligent and creative daughters, and is one of the most compassionate human beings I have ever known. Bottom line, she's a badass and the real deal. So thank you for joining us today, Lauren.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I feel like I'm already starting to cry here.
That's okay, we cry on the podcast too. All emotions are welcome. So I know you've listened to some episodes, so I think you're familiar with our pump and flat segment. So we would love, as our guest, if you'd kick that off for us today.
Well, I had to spend a lot of time thinking about this, and it was a little bit sad because I had more flats than pumps this week, and they're kind of related. So my flat this week, as you know, Liz, is that something is going on with me and I'm losing my hair. And I know that a lot of people have far worse problems, but I am a Southern sorority girl and I'm very vain about this. And it's really stressing me out because it's coming out in clumps. And, you know, when I met with you the other day, I had a hat on. So that was kind of a flat for me because we can't figure out what's going on. And the doctor was like, oh, it's stress. I'm like, I am stressed because my hair is falling out.
Yes.
And I don't know, you know, I'm a busy mom with 2 kids. I don't know how to not be stressed. So that's a little bit alarming. But my pump of the week is related to this, and that I found my husband secretly vacuuming and Swiffering so that I wouldn't see how much hair is all around. And, you know, in a season of Hallmark movies and Lifetime movies and people falling in love over hot chocolate, you know, we've been together 14 years. We don't have those moments. And sometimes the reality of how much he loves me hits me in the face and kind of takes my breath away. So that is a pump for me. And it really, you know, made this whole weird whatever's going on feel a little bit more, you know, a little bit less scary because I got this partner through it. So that was a big pump.
He's looking to support you in any way he can. And I'm sure that's got to be terrifying and frustrating, Lauren, to say the least. So I hope you get some answers.
You know, I'm just nervous he and I are going to rock the same hairdo.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. Linz, how was your week?
My week was okay. For pump, I'm working on a ton of projects at work, and I'm super excited because I have finally gotten to work with a company that I've been dying to work for, or with, I should say. And they are just in tune with diversity and inclusion and a bunch of different things. And they constantly promote the crew and everyone that they work with and for. And we're working with them, and I'm just super excited because they're just a bunch of great guys, and they are just amazing to work with.
That's great.
My flat moment, I went to the eye doctor yesterday, and I had a pretty good eye appointment. She gave me my eye sign off. And at the very end, when she handed it to me, she said, maybe it's time you should get some cheaters. And I said,
There's nothing wrong with that.
Liz, this was the last bastion I was holding on to.
I know you were.
And I said, excuse me? And she said, cheaters. And I walked out of there, and my husband came home, and he goes, you look really tired, which is always like the last thing you want to hear from
Because that means you look terrible. No one ever looked really hot and tired.
Yeah. And I said, the eye doctor said I need cheaters. And he goes, oh, are those the grandma glasses? And I said, yes, those are the grandma glasses, Brian. And you might need them too.
He's not as supportive as Lauren's husband, clearly.
No, we did not have a Hallmark moment.
That's right.
And so he just tidied up and cleaned up the plates and cleared them quietly and was like, I better not say another word. And I was like, yes. So that was my flat. What about you, Liz?
So my pump moment, I got to see my niece yesterday. My sister had a baby in July, in the middle of COVID. So she had a drive-by baby shower. No one could visit her in the hospital. No one could really visit her after the baby was born. I mean, they are understandably incredibly careful, with baby Lily. And so she lives 2 minutes away, but I haven't seen much of her or my niece. So I stopped by yesterday and oh my gosh, she's so precious. She's at that stage where she's got these big fat cheeks that literally like rest on her shoulders. And she's got the little chub around her wrist where it looks like there's like an elastic around her wrist. Like I just wanted to eat her up. And I had a mask on and she doesn't really know who I am and she can only see half my face, but she was smiley and just super expressive. And it was just really nice to interact with a child that smiles at you and doesn't talk back. So that was definitely my pump moment. My flat moment, on the other hand, not one of my finer parenting moments, which I feel like I could say that 27 times a day. My daughter, Avery, who's 8, was being such a pill. And it's all like with everything else, it always starts off really small. I simply asked her to pick up the toys that she had left on the floor of our family room and had been there all day. And she had not touched in hours. And she was, no, I'm still playing with them. I'm still playing with them. I said, no, you're not. Please pick them up. I'm tired of the mess. You have a playroom downstairs. You got to escalate. She finally tells me to shut up, which is super charming. And I had already gotten into it with my older son earlier in the day about missing schoolwork. So I was at like my boiling point. And I got pissed. So we have this decorative, like Christmas mailbox in front of our fireplace where the kids put their letters for Santa. So I went over to the mailbox. I took out her letter to Santa and I ripped it up in front of her. Turns out, ladies, joke was on me because she had already written a new list that she had yet to put in the mailbox, rendering the one I tore up completely obsolete. But I did get some minor satisfaction about just tearing that up. Then I felt really bad that I did that because that's pretty shitty. But I just fucking had it. And it was one of those days where I look back, and I have these days a lot, and I say to myself, how could I have handled that differently? And there's 25 ways I could have handled that better. And in the moment I didn't. And I'm really, really trying to learn my lessons. And unfortunately, they are all learned the hard way. So that was me. All right. So let's get into our main topic. Lauren, we're so excited to have you here. Can you give us a little bit of your background and why you got into teaching and why marketing?
Yeah, after college, I majored in marketing in college. And after college, I went to work in retail and I was a buyer, and which sounds really glamorous, but I bought men's denim, which is not glamorous. And I bought men's denim in the South, which is especially not glamorous, right? It's like really baggy and not flattering and nothing's cool about it. And this is in the early 2000s too. So, and I just didn't really like it. And so I kind of moved up the ranks. I worked for what was then Saks Incorporated, which owns Saks. And I had this quarter life crisis, which I think makes me extremely empathetic to what the students are going through now because they're more advanced than I am. So they have their quarter life crisis earlier. And I, took this career assessment test and it was like, you should be a priest, a lawyer, or a teacher. And I was like, I feel like this is how 95% of jokes start, right? I'm not really qualified to be a priest. So I talked to my grandmother. My grandmother actually had her doctorate, and I had just finished my master's, and she was like, "Why don't you go get a PhD?" She said, "I think you'd be a great college professor," and it had never occurred to me. And I, went and interviewed, and I was like, "Okay, this sounds good." It at least gave me a little bit of time to be in school longer, so I could figure out what I wanted to do. And my friends from college can't believe that I'm a professor, because in college I was like the worst student. But I think that makes me a good professor. So I've been now in academia for 17 years. I started when I was like 5. And it's been the greatest gift, because especially this generation of students, which I think is what we're going to talk about today, they're fantastic. They're amazing. And to me, being in the classroom is like such a sacred place, even if it's a virtual classroom, and being part of that learning journey and being able to make a positive impact with a young person, outside of my own children, is the most rewarding thing. So my specialty is actually retail, which I feel like I kind of chose in my early 20s so that I could shop and call it work, which still feels like a really good life choice. So I feel like I won the job lottery, that I get to study this thing that's so interesting and be with students that are just so amazing.
I think it's incredibly impressive that your grandmother has a doctorate. That generation of women, especially in the South.
I know.
Not to stereotype, but that's pretty impressive.
She was amazing. She actually, I think you would have loved her. She, as a widow, went back and got her PhD.
Wow.
And it was in like textiles, but most of her work was in chemistry, and she studied fashion. So wow. I think she was a little disappointed and kind of how I turned out a little bit fashion. But after, like, I remember when I graduated college and I moved, to take this buyer job, she came and stayed with me for a week, had to like teach me how to put on makeup and like wear all these like great outfits and stuff, because I was working with, all these like super fashionable women, and, she wanted to make sure I held my own. So
wow. She's obviously huge influence.
She was really something.
Oh my gosh. So you started your career teaching the millennial generation, and now we're in Gen Z. So tell us a little bit about, like, what have you seen the differences between those two generations, and has your teaching style had to evolve as a result?
Yeah, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm assuming we're all Gen Xers here.
Yeah.
I'm a proud Gen Xer, right? Like, we get
true.
to just like sit back and be angry and watch this. Right. And every generation thinks that the generation after them has it so easy, right? And should have to suffer in the same ways that we had to suffer. And, millennials, I think they get kind of a bad rap. And I want to say too, like, generational stereotypes are a little bit unfair, right? I don't want people to assume things about me because I'm a certain age. I mean, my students assume that I'm like a complete technological Luddite because I'm over 40. And I'm like, who do you think invented all the technology that you're using? I have to remind them of that. So I don't want to make too many generational stereotypes, but I have seen, students evolve in wonderful ways over the past 15, 17 years. And, I've had to adapt to my teaching style. When we were in college, we got, PowerPoints or, God forbid, transparencies, right? And we were lectured to, and we wrote notes, and then we regurgitated it back in an exam. And slowly that's changed, right? Millennials demanded more. They demanded more interaction. They just demanded more. But this new generation, they learn in a completely different way. And we can't teach them the way that we were taught, and we can't expect them to do things the way that we did, because they're in a completely different environment. I mean, ladies, how thankful are we that there was no social media when we were in college? I would have never gotten a job.
Oh my gosh.
No.
None of us would, probably.
So I think that we have to, so many times we want to force the situations that we had on the generations behind us, but that's really unfair to them. And these kids, this Generation Z, I tell you, I have so much hope in the world because of them. I mean, I didn't really feel this, tremendous amount of hope being in the classroom with millennials. I mean, I don't want to, bash this generation, but the Gen Z, I feel so much hope for the future and so much optimism. And I feel really afraid for them. They have a lot going on. I think that we, as a mentoring generation to them, have the responsibility to adapt and to help shepherd them through this time, but not force them into the molds that we think they should be in, but to help them shape their own molds. So we really had to, academics were, we're a little egotistical, and, we feel like we're the most knowledgeable ones. COVID has really made us completely change our styles of teaching. And there's, of course, some people that are resistant to that, but I feel really optimistic that this has forced all of us to change how we interact with students and how we teach them. And I think it's going to be a game changer for how this generation continues to learn.
What type of leaders do you think that the Generation Z are going to be?
I think they're going to be compassionate leaders. I think they're going to be empathetic leaders. They are so brave. I mean, they grew up, so Generation Z was born, the years kind of differ, but most people agree that somewhere between 1995 and 2010, right? So these guys were born in a time with a lot of technology, and a lot of them were born around the time of 9/11, right? Which was very stressful for our nation. So they've had this constant kind of tension in their lives. And so I think that they're super anxious. It's the most anxiety ridden, group that I've ever seen. And I want to take that from them because, I'm looking at them, I'm like, you're 21 years old. So your biggest issue right now should be, what am I going to wear this weekend? Who am I going to hook up with? Like, what bad mistakes am I going to learn from right now?
Which was what we did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want that for them. But I think, and they're not that way. That's not, I mean, they're still making mistakes in ways that they should, but like, they're just not as concerned with those kinds of issues. And they're very concerned with broader societal issues. It's wonderful. Their language around DE&I is truly inclusive versus we're still learning how to use inclusive language, right? We're still learning, the right pronouns and the right language. That's all, native to them. So I think that's very hopeful and optimistic. What makes me a little nervous is, with this kind of awareness and wokeness, they're quick to cancel. Really quick to cancel. So a lot of us live in fear of saying the wrong thing and just getting canceled, and that's the end of our careers. So they're really, setting this cancel culture. It's a little, I really encourage them to dig deeper and to allow people to make mistakes and, put them in situations where, how would you feel if you got canceled for this mistake? And so from a leadership perspective, I feel very optimistic, but I'm a little worried about how quick they are to cancel.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Lauren. And I don't know, like, how do you teach that? Because they are surrounded by social media, a 24-hour news cycle, information is coming at them all the time, and they're seeing cancel culture everywhere. Someone tweets something the wrong way, they all of a sudden lose their livelihood. Someone says something, in a meeting that someone takes offense to, they lose their job, whatever it is. And I don't know how you teach that, because that's become an ingrained part of our culture, which drives me bonkers. In a couple episodes ago, Lindsay and I talked about how there is no longer can we just agree to disagree type of philosophy in this country. It's either you're right and I'm wrong, and that's it. And there's no spirited debate. There's no learning from mistakes. There's no giving someone the opportunity to grow. What I might have tweeted 5 years ago might not be what I would tweet today, because I've had a lot of personal growth in that 5 years. So I don't know how you teach that, but I completely agree with you that it terrifies me that we're kind of raising kids or young adults that are living in this cancel culture.
It terrifies me too. I mean, I try to teach using a lot of examples and putting them in situations where they could be empathetic. I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago, a police officer in Ohio posted a picture of a mother or a man and a woman, I'm assuming they were parents, completely methed out and like OD'd in a minivan with the child in the back. And I showed that to the students and I said, what do you think? Like, because that's a marketing tactic, right? It's a marketing, strategy that the police officer had. And they were like, oh, absolutely. They should totally do that. They should be held responsible for their actions. I said, okay. So then I posted a picture of somebody who had used their cell phone to text somebody and caused an accident. And I was like, okay, now there's this person who actually did more damage, right? Actually killed someone. Do you think that their whole life should be over because they made this mistake? And I was like, what if I told you I was going to fail you if I saw you texting and driving? I mean, to me, that's as dangerous, right? It doesn't seem as offensive, right? Because there's drugs versus texting, but like, that's as dangerous. And I don't know if that changed their minds, but it caused them pause. And we really encourage them to reflect more, right? And to dig deeper on things. So, they're always like, oh, I'm super sustainable, but yet they shop fast fashion. And so, I have projects in my class that make them dive into the whole supply chain and figure out, okay, where is this fast fashion coming from? And what are the, societal and economic implications? And then they'll say, well, oh, this facility uses child labor. You should never work with them. And I'm like, okay, well, if we shut down that facility, then those children then don't have a job, their parents don't have a job, and chances are pretty good they're going to be sold into, some kind of human slavery or human trafficking. So should the company not work with them? And so just to get them to dig deeper and think deeper and take a more systems perspective, I've really had to craft my assignments and my projects to be more, these kids, this idea like regurgitating, half of my students have, accommodations because they get so much test anxiety. They're not learning with an exam, right? But they're learning with projects and like hands-on. I'm old school in some of my activities. I like bring in the glue and the scissors and I'm like, okay, let's make a diagram and really work this out, because I think that that's the only way to get them to just think. I want them to think about their thinking. These ideas of like regurgitating test questions and standardized tests, it's all got to go. That's not the way these kids are going to learn.
Yeah, agreed. It's funny that you say that, because my son had to take a social studies test the other day. He had to retake it because he did not do quite so well the first time, but it was a map of ancient Rome. And there were, geographic locations and bodies of water that he had to label. And it was like 15 or 20 of them. I don't know. And so I said, all right, you need to study for this. And I basically made him sit there in front of the map for however long he needed to sit there to just memorize it. And then I gave him some practice tests, and I made him take the practice tests until he got everything right. And then he went in the next day and he took the test and he got everything correct, which is great. I'm sure if I gave him a blank map right now and asked him to fill it in, he would not be able to. And I was thinking, as I was forcing him to sit there and study, and I was like, what is he getting out of this?
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. To me, I think the more powerful thing, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that's how we did it, right? And we're like, well, we turned out okay. Right. We know where the oceans and seas are. But these kids don't learn that way. And I think that that's part of the problem. They're so anxious. The anxiety level is unbelievable. I have first and second year students coming to me freaking out because they don't know what they want to do when they graduate. I'm like, I'm 43 years old and I still am like, well, is this the right thing? So I'm like, you shouldn't know, right? But they have so much anxiety. And part of it is because our generation and the generations before us have forced them to these rubrics and have measured their success as a human by their academic success. And, we like, when you're a young person, you compare yourself to other people, right? That's what you do. Yep. And that's, that's a horrible thing. But now social media, that escalates made it worse. That. And not only are they comparing themselves, but their parents are posting pictures of them, and their parents are comparing their kids to other kids. And, I hear it in our community, like, oh, our kids aren't going to get into a good college. And I'm like, okay, they're in kindergarten. They need to learn how to not be an asshole. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that but we have these like standardized tests and we have these rubrics. And what's terrifying to me is that these kids, every time I give them an assignment, I'm like forcing this creativity, and they're like, what's the rubric? And I'm like, I'm not giving you a rubric, because then you will just perform to that. But that's what society has done to them. Yeah. So their self-worth is tied to how they perform on these rubrics, and nobody can do that well. I mean, nobody can constantly perform to the rubric, and you're not giving them any critical thinking skills if you're telling them exactly what to do and then rewarding them when they do it right. And they're so afraid of failing that they won't take any leaps of faith. And that to me is terrifying. And I just want to take that from them because they're so magical. They're so polite. They're so gentle. And, you know, you're watching these like traditional gender norms evaporate. Like, it's wonderful. And I'm like, I want all of this magic to continue to happen for them. I don't want them to continue to be like, well, I didn't do well on the standardized test, so my whole life is screwed up and I'm just going to go hide in my parents' basement.
Yeah. I mean, they're never going to be able to solve real world problems if they need to perform against a certain checklist.
Lauren, I think it's awesome that you are thinking differently and out of the box for them in school, because that's what they're going to need, and that's what they're going to need for life. And I hope that other teachers and professors are thinking this way. But I agree with you that there's so many magical things with this this generation, because I know quite a few, and they are so polite and they are so nice and they think differently. And I feel that there's parental pressures that have been put on them. And unfortunately, it's kind of pressures that Generation X has also like, oh my gosh, what college, you know, we've been, boomer generation has put on us to put on the next generation. And it's this domino effect. And now with colleges being so expensive, we kind of are forced to look at it. Is that the answer for everybody anyways right now?
No. I mean, no. I mean, I'm a college professor. I want to keep my job. Not everybody's going to be successful in college. I mean, and the thing is too, like, this is what I want people to be okay with their kid. Not every kid needs to go to Harvard. That's not the best school for every child. So, you know, I'm a professor at an amazing business school, right? And and it feels awkward, you know, as a woman, we don't want to toot our own horn, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm a pretty good professor.
Yes, you are.
And I was a good professor at schools that weren't ranked, right? I mean, because I have a dual career, you know, relationship, I've been at schools that were like, you know, primarily first generation, non-traditional college students, 25, 26 years old. There are good professors at every school. There are bad professors at every school. Your child is going to make the learning path that they need to make at whatever school that they're at. So, I mean, I had students at my previous institution that are now like crushing it at like Nike and Adidas. And I have students that just graduated from Babson that are still working at Starbucks. I mean, it's the where you go to school doesn't define you. I think you find a school, you know, we're teaching them, you know, the basic business skills and the basic skills that they need, but college is also about learning how to manage your freedom, learning how to, you know, be a good friend and manage your time. And I think that we need to give them, you know, we need to give them the space to have those moments too, and not just put all this academic pressure on them. And you get that when you find your people, and your people aren't always at like these top tier schools. And I think that the success of a human being afterwards, after college or after grad school or whatever, is not dependent on where they went. I mean, I still struggle. There are schools who won't interview me because I don't have the PhD pedigree that they want. And I'm like, you know what? You are missing out. I think that companies are starting to realize, all right, we don't have to recruit, you know, we recruit based on skills, soft skills, hard skills over this pedigree now. And so I think that gives me some hope.
I want to go back to the parental involvement for a second, because I know for me personally, it's something I totally struggle with in terms of how involved, you know, do I want to be to facilitate success for my kids. And it's something I definitely struggle with my older son. He's in middle school now, and he has, you know, executive functioning challenges and whatnot. So I tend to insert myself quite a bit with him, which I don't know if I'm doing him any favors or not. So how have you seen kind of like the parental involvement with your students evolve over the years? I mean, do you hear from them if their kids are upset about a grade or if they're looking for a job or?
Not as much anymore. It was worse with the millennials. And I want to say something like, as a, I struggle with that too. And, Liz, as a friend of yours, I think you're the best wing woman. I mean, you're the best person to have in someone's corner. And I think your kids are lucky to have this fierce advocate. And I can't imagine that you would do anything that would actually ever jeopardize their success. So
thank you.
I do think that's our job, right? Is to advocate for our children. And one of the ways that we do that is, making sure that they get all the resources that they need. I do think once kids are 18, 19 years old, I mean, there are laws against me talking to parents. So there are, privacy laws. Once a kid's over 18, I can't talk to their parents about their grade, right?
Oh.
So, which is great, because then that just shuts it down.
Yeah.
We do have some, I'm in a pretty affluent school. We do have some parents that kind of try to use money to help enforce a decision one way or the other. I feel very fortunate. I have the complete autonomy to run my class the way I want to run my class. I mean, I don't give grades. They earn them. But the parental involvement was actually much worse about 10 years ago.
Wow.
That's when the helicopter parent thing really escalated. I had a parent one time call me because her daughter, her stomach wasn't feeling well and she wasn't going to be able to make the exam. And I was like, well, it sounds like she's probably shitting her pants because she didn't study.
That's amazing.
I don't have time for that. I have so much empathy and respect for these students, but I'm not going to let them get away with not coming to me directly. And I don't see that as much with these kids. I think because they've had such great relationships with their teachers before, they're not afraid, and also too, now I'm kind of like more of a mom figure to them, which really, I still look at them sometimes and I'm like, oh my God, I could totally outdance you and hang in the bar longer in my head. But to them, I'm like, they say to me repeatedly, oh, it's like having a mom in the classroom. I'm like, that kind of stabs me in the heart a little bit. But I do, I see them as someone's children. And, I see them as someone who has a bunch of people that love them very much and, want them to be successful. And I think parents are, I recognize as a parent, I recognize parents are doing the best they can. I don't have a lot of interaction with parents anymore. Thank goodness, because that would be such a travesty for, I mean, you used to hear these stories of parents going on interviews with their kids.
Yes.
We don't see that as much anymore. I think because we're Gen X, right? And we were home by ourselves. And I think there is a part of us that wants to make sure that our children have these coping skills and the tools that they need to be successful without us. And it's heartbreaking. So we're not as helicopter parents. I do think, I'm sure you guys have heard these snowplow parents, right? Pave the way for them in front of us. That happens, right? I do think parents pave the way for their kids to get into these good schools and do, have all these experiences prior. But I don't think that they're hovering around while they're having them. So
do you think so? I know obviously this generation, like you had said earlier, is the most anxiety ridden generation, but I think people in general they're more open about that, right? That generation is very much open about what they're struggling with, I think. So do you think that being able to be honest kind of about what they're struggling with gives them the, I guess, maybe confidence or comfort level to advocate for themselves and to, I don't know, just be more self-assured in some ways?
I think that in some ways, I think it's really, I think they're comfortable asking for help and saying that this is a problem. I mean, I have students tell me, I have anxiety, I'm anxious about this, which 15 years ago, that wouldn't have happened, right? And I never would have told the professor I was anxious, right? So I think it's our response to that, though, that's critical. And giving the students the resources that they need. I think for so much of us, I mean, everybody feels this way. And I'm sure we've all experienced it even as women in our careers. You have women, more advanced than we are. And they either want to lift other women up, or they're like, I had it hard, you should have it hard. I'm the queen, I'm not sharing this throne with the princess. And I think that translates into a lot of other things as well. I think, we're like, well, I didn't have these resources. Well, we didn't have these same challenges that they had, right? I mean, we didn't have this like constant pressure to be perfect. And so I think when communities work together to provide resources for students when they have these challenges, it makes it easier for them to come out and ask for help. So, I'm very fortunate to be at a student-centric university where, I mean, we are so student-focused. There are so many resources for them. Even if I think a student is struggling, I have so many tools at my disposal to get that student, the resources that they need. And it's not up to me to be their guidance counselor, but I have this whole community that can support them. And, I think that's comforting and gives them the confidence to ask for help. I still think it's a struggle because they're, feel a stigma. But I've noticed every year, the request for accommodations, it goes up every year, which means it's not that there's more students that have test anxiety. It means there's more students comfortable asking for help. And that's wonderful.
That's huge. That's huge. I want to shift gears for a second. So with Lindsay and I were kind of chatting before the call about how today there's like so many more interesting like courses available to take in college versus when we were in school, when you had like, all right, freshman math and freshman English and your core classes for your major. And okay, that's it. So what class at Babson would you love to have taken when you were in college?
I teach retail, and I think about the semester that I try to give my students, like them coming back to school in this weird hybrid, like partially online. Some students are, still in their home country because they can't get in, they don't want to come to the US. So I had this community where there's like 14 students in my class and, 26 students online. And I just really wanted to make it special for them. So I brought in all of these like really cool speakers. Like I brought in like this professional cyclist who rode in like 17 Tour de France's. I brought in all these CEOs. And, I would love to take any of the classes that we offer. But, it's so fun because I think schools are really thinking about innovative curriculum. And even just making these, we have to give them core stuff, right? We have to give them basic, they have to be able to write, they have to be able to present, they have to be articulate, we have to give them those classes, but the way in which we deliver them has just improved. But I'm the chair of our division. And I'm such an advocate of like experimenting with curriculum and, we also have business communication in my division. And, we were talking the other day about offering just a class on how to read nonverbal cues. And what that does in a business situation and what it means virtually, right? How do you read nonverbal cues virtually? Like, how can you tell when that person's, looking at, his or her phone or playing candy or whatever? So I just think we're always thinking about, just, and I think we get to deliver it in a different way. We're always thinking about, it doesn't have to be a 4-credit class anymore, right? We have these opportunities to do intensives or modules or badging or certificate programs. And, we learned in a very linear fashion. These students do not. And so we can't teach in a linear fashion. And so, but to me, it's exciting because it opens up a whole new world of opportunities. But we have like, right now we have a class in my department taught by 2 women. One is a communication specialist and one is a psychology expert, PhD in psychology, both in the marketing and business comm division. They're teaching a class called Communicating for Positive Behavior Change. And students have to like, think of a problem, like think of something that they want to change, and then do these kind of interventions and then reflect on, did that behavior change? And then they have to go do it on other people, right? So they give these projects for like increasing recycling and increasing voting. And it's just, we're teaching people how to persuade people, right?
Marketing.
But it's for something positive, right? And so I like looked at the syllabus and was like, and I've been doing some of the things that they said, right? Trying to floss every day. And Like, I'm going to use some of these tactics. And so I think, we have our curriculum is just amazing, and it's so fun to be able to continue to innovate, and to just change our delivery. And even just looking at some of the content that we use, we're really, it's so wonderful to see people create new cases, new content that actually has better representation of what's happening in the world. I mean, for so long, cases, the protagonist was like a middle-aged white dude.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing, and of course, he always wins, right?
Right.
There's always a happy ending for him. No pun intended. But we, now we're seeing protagonists that are, people of color, transgender, older, like, and it's just so great to see. Even it's the problems that we would have addressed in our classes, 20 years ago, but just seeing it in a way that actually represents what the world is.
Looks like.
It's kind of inspiring and exciting.
That's amazing.
That is. Well, just hearing like your passion for what you do and for your students, I mean, our kids would be lucky to have teachers that have half of your enthusiasm for learning and teaching, and it gives me hope.
Babson.
Yeah.
I want to keep my job.
Yeah. No, that's been really, really interesting. And it gives like me as a parent hope that, where we are with our kids today in this crazy COVID hybrid learning environment, like they're going to be okay. And I've been trying to focus more on their mental health than, the academic piece. Cause for me, I feel like right now that's what they need, and we'll catch up on the academic piece, whenever.
I feel so strongly about that. I mean, the mental health component is more important. You can't learn when you're anxious or depressed.
Yep.
And so I think finding, my kindergartner, I don't care that she can't read right now. I want her to feel safe and, feel like she's part of a community. I mean, those things really matter so much more. The academics, we're going to get them there. I'm not going to let anybody, go through my class and not have the material that they need, right? I'm going to bend over backwards and meet them every single day until they get to where they need to be. Most professors, we're not going to let them fail. We don't want them to fail. It makes us look bad when they fail. Right. And I think most teachers feel that way. And so I think really just making the mental health component, just taking that pressure off ourselves as parents and taking that pressure off of them is really just the most important thing. And just, giving them the safe place to make a mistake and not tying our own success as a parent to their academic success, I think
that's huge.
Important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was really, really interesting and very insightful. So this week we are closing our episode with our Celebrities They Are Not Just Like Us segment. So this week we wanted to chat about Kelly Clarkson's estranged husband, who is requesting, brace yourselves ladies, $436,000 a month in spousal and child support.
Yeah.
I'm unclear why someone needs that much money every 30 days in order to support themselves when he has a job. Okay. And she, I believe, has primary physical custody of the children.
She does.
So, and that amount breaks down to $301,000 in spousal support.
Yes.
So he is requesting 3 times the amount of support for himself than he is for his
kids,
children. I don't even know what to say.
Lauren's mouth is like hanging open.
I don't even know what I would do with that much money. Like, I mean, how many pairs of shoes and like, how big does a house have to be? What do you even do with that?
Right. Well, you buy a brand new Lamborghini every month or something? I have no idea.
The thing that is amazing about Kelly Clarkson, though, is that she has taken the high road with all of this, and she has like literally not talked really bad about him and just said, I'm sad about it. This is what it is. But he's trying to take the kids to Montana, and this is what he said that he's doing. And on top of it, I found out that his dad's company is also trying to sue her. Additionally, for $5 million. Starstruck Entertainment is suing her and saying that Clarkson owes over $5 million to them. And Narvel Blackstock is the owner of the company. So
They sound
sit
like
on that,
jerks.
ladies. And Reba McIntyre, right? That's
Yes.
okay. I always get her last name. I always want to say McIntosh.
I know. And when you were texting me, it autocorrected to MaxiPad.
I was like,
what is she saying?
I'm like, I swear to God that her mother-in-law is Reba Maxi Pad. It came out Maxi Pad. And then I think I said it again. So Reba is her mother-in-law, ex now, obviously. But it's a married in ex. It's all this complication. But Narvel, what a name.
Yeah, and I don't know where he gets off asking for that much money every
Yes.
month. It is lunacy.
So the ex and the father-in-law are both asking for a crap load of money.
Just leave Kelly alone. She seems lovely.
I've always really liked her because she's so body positive,
Mhm.
and I just feel like it's been so amazing, just to see this woman who is not like a size 0 be successful in an industry that rewards size 0. So I've always really like rooted for her, and she's got an awesome voice. And I mean, come on, how many times can we listen to Stronger when we've had a bad day? Like, it just like pumps you out. So this is really discouraging to me. I mean, I appreciate that she's taking the high road, but I also kind of feel like she needs to be a little bit like, okay, hold my beer. Oops, I'd handle this, right? Like, I kind of want to see her get a little gritty here.
Completely.
Yes, and maybe after all the legalities are over, she can come out with, a brand new album that will just eviscerate this dude.
Yes, I hope so.
Oh, man.
So even though this episode might have made you feel old, especially me, since I was officially told by a doctor I have to wear cheaters, you should put on those heels and a fabulous outfit and dance around the living room. You're only as old as you feel, and this group of ladies feels young. Maybe not as young as Generation Z, but we will try really hard. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We so appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Are so insightful. You are inspirational to us as mothers and women. And I just can't believe that Generation Z is so lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And just for everyone who's listening, she's a teacher at Babson. Send your kids to Babson College if you are interested. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, on our website and Instagram at Multitasking and Heels. And please go to iTunes where you can subscribe, rate, and review. You can also find us on Spotify. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you guys for listening. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.